that experience is when I had just an amazing experience. I will never forget it for the rest of my life. It was very life-changing. I cried for 4 hours. I released the pain of my depression. I released a lot. It was just the most incredible thing that had ever happened to me physically and also with my brain.
Welcome to the multiverse, where we believe that mushrooms can actually change the world, and that if humans mirrored the magic and wisdom of the fungi kingdom, we would have a far more joyous and connected planet. Each week, we'll be meeting with thought leaders and experts to extract the best insights and stories across everything from functional fungi, psychedelic medicine, and so much more. Thanks for listening. Step into the multiverse with us. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Into the Multiverse. This is a very, very special moment in time because this is our 31st episode of this podcast. We actually just took a 4-month break. And the 31st guest of the show is my mom. So I'm so excited to have you here. We kind of decided to do this yesterday. So this is a very on-the-fly, last-minute episode that we may or may not release. And the reason that I wanted to record it is mostly for myself and Maddie and Jack, who are my siblings. And I think you have a really powerful story to share. So thank you for saying yes, first of all. And I'm so glad to also be closing this chapter of the podcast with you because this is the last episode that we're going to record here in this home before I move.
Right.
Thanks for coming on the show, Mom.
Thanks for asking me, Alli.
Okay, so I want to start by just giving a little overview of what we're going to talk about. I want to talk about the way that we were born first. I want to talk a little bit about early childhood in our lives, talk a little bit about some decisions you and Dad that I think are really impactful in this entire journey. And then I want to talk about psychedelics. So to start, I want to take people back 30 years ago, 3 decades ago, when you and Dad were getting pregnant with us. For people that do not know, I'm a triplet. So you have 3 triplet babies that are no longer babies. We're adults in the world, but we were born in a really unique way. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that experience, that decision, and then we will go from there.
Okay. Well, when I first met your dad, we knew I could not have children. And it was pretty incredible because he said, well, we'll just adopt. That's not a big deal. And so our journey was tough because it was 6 years of trying to get pregnant, getting pregnant, having losses, and just really struggling. So it was a testament to our marriage, I think, because we both suffered in different ways. But the miracle was that my sister, who is 13 months younger than I am, said, look, I'm going to help you have a baby. This was after 6 years. And I was very surprised that she would approach me with this, but I sort of pushed her aside and said, gosh, this is really, really nice, but I don't know if you really know what you're offering. And she was very insistent. She had had 2 children, both very young, and said, I had a vision and spoke to God, and I know I can do this for you. And she pushed and pushed, and I talked to Marty about it, and we were like, gosh, this is maybe what we should do if she's really on board. So we did. We went in to find a doctor to take our case in St. Louis. That was a challenge because we were sisters. We think that we're the first sisters in the United States to deliver triplets. So we went in and did in vitro fertilization with both of us in separate rooms. And we went home and thought maybe something was happening. And we were pregnant. We were both pregnant. So it was just unbelievable to me. Because that we were pregnant.
You were told multiple times that you couldn't have children. You were about to potentially even have a procedure to maybe tie your fallopian tubes. You guys were in the adoption process.
We did try to adopt and got rejected.
Yeah.
And so and lost pregnancies in the 6 years. It was heartbreaking. So to have you and Jack and Maddie was my every dream.
And there's a few more unique angles to the story that I think are interesting, that people will find interesting. One is that, so you delivered Maddie and Jack on Christmas Day.
Yeah, Barb was not, Barb, my sister, who carried you, your aunt. She wasn't very good at math. And she said, if we do the procedure in May, you'll have February babies. And I said, oh, that'd be great. I just kind of want to avoid Christmas, but I'll take a baby any day. And so I delivered 5 weeks early on Christmas Day and had Jack and Maddie. And you were still cooking with Aunt Barb, and you had a month to go. And so it was really just surreal that we had these 2 preemie babies, knowing you were coming and preparing for you. And that was crazy. And then you arrive exactly 30 days later on January 25th.
So from this point, 9 months later, you guys are all of a sudden, you go from 0 babies to 3 babies. And then Dad got a really unique job offer to move us to Taipei, Taiwan. And that's where we spent the first 7 years or so of our lives. And so, after Taiwan, you guys pick up and you come back to America. You come back to Missouri, and that's where we grew up. That's where we grew up throughout, around age 7, 8, and through high school. And I'd love to talk about your experience with substances and your original understanding of psychedelics. And it's been such an interesting journey for our relationship. So I'm going to give a little bit of context. Is that, we grew up with the DARE program. We grew up with Just Say No to Drugs. I've talked about this many times on the podcast, and how my original understanding of substances was very specific, in that all substances were bad. And so, we would have that education. We'd come home, and I remember sharing about that with you. And it wasn't until post-college, when I was in my first corporate job, when I first started to become educated and really passionate about psychedelics and really the study of them, that we started to have these conversations around them. But I'd love for you to kind of just share, your own perspective, your growing up experience, the narrative that was shared with you around psychedelics, and then we'll go from there.
I didn't want to have anything to do with drugs at all. And really, your dad did not have experience with drugs like I did in college with marijuana. So he didn't really know either, but didn't approve of drugs. So when you were growing up, it was very important to me that you guys never touched marijuana at all. It was very important to me. And I felt that we probably had an addictive family and that would not be good for any of you. So it was very important that you did not touch drugs.
And so fast forward to now, sitting on our podcast about psychedelics, which has, psychedelics have been transformative in my life, my mental health. I genuinely feel I'm a better person because of my understanding of them and my understanding of how they can positively impact the brain, your ability to love more, your ability to be a more connected human. And I know that you now share a similar sentiment because of your experiences in the way later stage of your life with psychedelics. And I'd love to share with people that might be in a similar place, like what you just shared, that might be their perspective. How did you go from there to then, wanting to have an experience with psilocybin for the first time?
Well, it was partially through you. You had started talking about psilocybin, and I didn't even know what that was. And I was very concerned that you were even discussing it.
You couldn't pronounce it for the first few years, for sure.
I could not pronounce it nor spell it. And you were telling me about a book that I should look into, and I really liked whenever you would refer a book to me, and you told me it was by Michael Pollan, Open Your Mind. And
How to Change Your Mind.
How to Change Your Mind. Thank you. And I just was aware that you were very interested. And I think you had even indicated to me that you thought you would try it. And I was like, I just don't think that that's a really good idea at all. And so I was at the airport. I happened to see his book on the shelf. And I said, oh my gosh, here's the book that you mentioned. So I bought it, picked it up, and started to read it. And I was blown away reading this, understanding the history of psychedelics, and also reading about people's journeys in the book and what it did for them, the religious experiences and other experiences. And I was very intrigued. And so I felt like my mind had opened just by reading the book. And then you called me probably 2 or 3 months after that and said, I'm going to go do my first psilocybin experience.
Which was, caveat, the first time I had opened up to sharing about it with you, because I had been experimenting prior to that, but I hadn't felt comfortable sharing with you up until that point. But I knew that because your perspective was changing.
That's not a surprise.
Yeah.
So when you told me you were going for the first time, I said, I think you should do it. And I was just so surprised that I would say that to you ever. And I think it was because I had some knowledge finally about what this was. And I was just on my tiptoes waiting to see what had happened to you and what it was like.
Hi guys, taking a brief second away from the show to tell you a little bit about our sponsor, Supermush. Supermush is actually a brand that I co-founded. You may have heard us talking about Supermush and or functional mushrooms throughout the show, but long story short, functional mushrooms completely changed my life. I started using them as a part of my daily routine about 6 years ago. Everything about my vitality, my skin, my hair, my energy levels were on a completely new playing field that I had never experienced before. And we started Supermush to help other people get their daily dose of mushrooms back into their world, but in a way that was really easy and on the go and accessible and tasted good, because a lot of times mushrooms don't taste great. Supermush is actually the most effective way for you to get functional mushrooms into your system because they're in the format of functional mushroom mouth sprays. We make 3 mouth sprays for energy, immunity, and chill. A lot of people don't know this, but mouth sprays actually have the fastest absorption rates. You will feel their effects almost immediately. I use all 3 of them every single day: energy in the morning, immunity in the afternoon, and chill every single night before I go to bed. If you would like to try Supermush, you can use code ITM15 at checkout. That's ITM15. This will give you 15% off your next order at supermush.com. We also make a whole line of really cool mushroom festival forward streetwear. And if you want to stay in the know for everything that we're up to as far as events, new product launches, you can join our text program by texting MUSH, MUSH, to 38048. And then from that point, we started to explore other resources together. We watched Fantastic Fungi together after I had seen the film. That was really impactful in your journey as well. And it was really interesting because now there was an interest from you and Dad as well. Dad was kind of following your footsteps a little bit. He wasn't as interested.
Yeah, you would tell me about your experiences, and then in reading about other people's experiences, I really thought that there was something to this. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be great if I could experience something profound? I did not want to learn about psilocybin in the way that it would just make me happy and feel good. I had zero interest for that. But what I did have interest in was if I needed help, could it help me? And I did need help at that particular time that I tried it. And so my perspective had shifted, that this is something that I want to try. I think I could gain something from psilocybin, even though I felt that my life was pretty great. I had a great life. I was very happily married, had 3 wonderful children. But I did, for the first time in my life, face depression. And that would have been probably about 6 years ago, and I didn't know what that was. Didn't really have it as a child. Didn't know what it was, but it definitely came to my door. And so I thought, well, maybe trying psilocybin will help me to release that. And you said, look, I think we should try it. And I said, okay, okay, are you sure we're going to be okay? And you said, I think it would be good for you to try this. And so you came and you brought the book by Michael Pollan, and you took us outside and opened up pages of the book, and you explained how the brain is going to expand with the neuroplasticity. And you also had us write with intention what we wanted to do with this. And I had a focus because I had read the book and I knew I had intention. And so we tried it, and the first experience wasn't great for me. So later, we tried it again, and it could have been 6 months later. Mm-hmm. And during that experience is when I had just an amazing experience. I will never forget it for the rest of my life. It was very life-changing. I cried for 4 hours. I released the pain of my depression. I released a lot. It was just the most incredible thing that had ever happened to me physically and also with my brain. And it's very hard to describe to someone what an experience like that, what the impact is. There are lots of details in my journey that were profound. But I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just incredible what I felt. And so I can just say that I had the best journey of anyone. Compared to the journeys I read about in Michael Pollan's book, I could not believe it. I just could not believe that had happened to me. So it was profound.
And one of the things that you shared with me that I thought was really interesting is you described that you felt your brain light up. And if you know what's happening to your brain when psilocybin is converted to psilocin and it is in your system, your brain lights up. You're forming new neural pathways that you've never used before. So you're actually changing your neuronal structure, you're resetting your neuronal structure. And your description of that felt like you were actually experiencing and feeling that happen to your brain.
Well, when you read to us that this could possibly happen to us in the journey,
and I showed you the photos.
You showed me the photos, how the brain would respond. This was especially intriguing to me because I was diagnosed with epilepsy at age 16. I had grand mal seizures until in my 30s. And then finally got off of my medication and no longer had any seizures. But I was told, having epilepsy, that my neurons they just weren't firing, that I had a problem with my neurons in the brain. And that was my understanding of epilepsy, that I just had a disconnect. So when you told me that I could connect those neurons, that really resonated with me because I thought, well, that would be cool for me because I've been told that can't happen for me. And that was why I had epilepsy. And so at the end of my journey, I specifically remember feeling my brain, both sides in the front, just pulsating and feeling the neurons fire. And that was just, who feels their brain like that? And then it went to the middle, and then it went to the back. And I was just like, oh my gosh, my neurons are really firing. And it was just to feel the brain muscle physically do that. I was just so excited because I thought, oh, I'm going to create new pathways. And I think it was profound for me because maybe I didn't know that. I mean, I did know that I couldn't do it. So I really felt it physically happening.
I've noticed that since that experience and that day that our relationship has significantly changed. And in part, it's because something that I'm so passionate about, I now have the ability to speak about with you in a way that you can understand because you've experienced it, but also just because I think it's made our relationship stronger because of the different things that it unlocked for both of us. And I'm curious if you feel the same way. I'm curious what you feel is the biggest takeaway you have from that first experience.
There's no question that whatever pain or suffering that you're going through, whether big or small, and you taught me this, that if that was my focus, and if I could somehow guide myself to help myself with things that I knew I wanted to change, that I could do that. And that happened for me. I was able to release some pain that I was in. I was also able to release some other things. And I think for me, this was a very religious experience for me, which was super profound. I believe in God and I believe in Jesus. And that was very present for me. And so sort of being able to take a glimpse to that side of our other lives that we're all going to eventually see and meet, that was very profound for me to know that I was incredibly loved. Incredibly loved, not like you love me, not like your dad loved me, but to experience love on that level, I just will never forget it. And so I came away knowing that everything was okay. I was going to be okay. And it was just a gift that I never expected to receive. And so I was just so grateful for it. I just felt like I sort of had some answers what was on the other side of our lives on earth. And I was just embraced. I was held. I was loved. And I also had assurance that everything was going to be okay. And so I came out of that journey just a new person, not as tightly wound. I'm the oldest of 5. I was a mother to my sisters and my brother, and I was a mother to my mother. We were 16 years apart. So I think that there was some, just the way that my personality would come across to some people would be off-putting, probably because I'm bossy. And so I felt like I released some of that too, which felt good, to not be wound so tight and just to sort of go out in the world just with lighter feet and a happier sense of being.
And I noticed that you laughed more, and that because you're so funny. You're so funny. I laugh so hard with you. You're one of the funniest people that I know, and I know a lot of pretty funny people. And I just noticed you felt like you were just playing more, and you were returning to this kind of childlike sense of joy. A few different factors, and maybe it's because you released some of these things, but I felt this different spirit from you that felt like it kind of reemerged.
Yeah, and that's true, Alli. Yeah, when you're not going through life wound so tightly, then you can become just lighter in how you move, lighter in how you see other people, lighter in your observations of other people, and maybe your judgment of other people. Mm-hmm. And so that was lovely to know that I could tap into that.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Dad, and I want to open the conversation by reading a little excerpt from this thing that I recently wrote about my experience with his death. And I'm going to read it, okay, and then we'll go from there. So Dad died 3 months and 4 days ago today, at the time that we're recording this podcast. And the last 13 weeks have been so intense for our family, for your life, for all the people that loved him so much. And while it has been so inexplicable and heartbreaking on so many levels, it has also been one of the most beautiful, potent experiences of my life. And I think that, death is the ultimate teacher. And if you really lean in, that there's so many beautiful lessons that can be extracted from this experience. So here's what I wrote. I'm going to read it, and then I want to ask you a few questions about it. So death forces us to pay attention. Death is arguably more impactful than life because it commands a collective consciousness to the lessons that your life represented, often in a more effective way than you could have ever conveyed while still breathing, no matter how good you were with a microphone. In my understanding, there are 3 things that wake us up to the reality of our own mortality in a more abrupt way than any other. 1 is a near-death experience, a brief visitation of where you're going, where your life flashes before your eyes. 2 is you die before you die, aka experience ego death, most commonly through a psychedelic experience. And 3 is someone that you love dies suddenly. If you're lucky, you will experience 1 and 2 and emerge unscathed physically and transformed spiritually. Yet it can be easy to slip back into old patterns. But when number 3 occurs and someone you love passes without warning or preparation, their physical absence from your 3D world creates an immediate void that shocks the system in a more permanent way. The sudden halt of a life forces a new reality that takes the bumpers off your lane at the bowling alley, necessitates new understandings, and requires matrix speed implementation of further waking up to what it means to be human. And one of my spiritual teachers that I really look up to in the world of psychedelics shared with me during one of my recent experiences before Dad passed that every time you take a breath, you should say, thank you. And that was the first thing that I thought about when I found out, just because it was so sudden and so out of nowhere. So if you're open to talking about it and knowing with the caveat that we can, not release this at all, we can cut this part out. But I'd love to talk about what happened, because I think what makes this experience so profound is in part because of how sudden it was.
Yeah. Well, your dad was my soulmate, the love of my life. I just had a blast for 36 years. It's tough having triplets. There's a lot of challenges. The fact that we survived that and we survived overseas is a testament to where we were in our relationship. We had the utmost respect for one another, and we both lived our authentic lives. It was the best. So to lose your dad so suddenly is the hardest thing that I've ever known. But I have to say that because of my psilocybin journey that I had previous to his death, I had a glimpse and an understanding of where we go and what happens to us and how we're loved. So because I had that experience, I knew that he was really loved and in a great place. So there was a lot of comfort in that. And I also believe that they're just on the other side. I have since had another psilocybin journey that my cousin Matt invited me to, and this was a week ago. And he's also very much in your world, tapping into psilocybin and these other medicines that can help people. And he invited me to meet with him and other people to experience this again. I wasn't really sure I wanted to do it, but I felt I couldn't say no. So I went and had another psilocybin experience. And I was so glad I did it, because I just really felt that in death, the person is really just there on the other side. And you kept telling me, he's here, and I didn't feel that or believe that. But in this second journey, I felt your dad, and he told me he was here. He told me he was nearby, that he wasn't far, and it makes sense because there are other people who needed him. And so I feel like in our deaths, we are able to travel around and sort of give comfort to the people that we left behind, because that was confusing for me. What happens to the person who dies? What happens to their spirit? Surely they're just not given amnesia so that they can somehow go on. So I feel like I was given yet another gift and understanding how things might work. And I have a lot of peace in that. I feel like he is near. I feel like the people who leave us are granted visitations, and maybe they even wear a pair of angel wings, and they're able to float over us and maybe throw some lights on us that resemble that they love us. They can't stop things from happening, but can be there to comfort us. So I feel that he is with me. And I hope that as life goes on and you go back into your old habits, that I can keep bringing myself to this, because it gives me peace and it gives me comfort. I cannot wait to see your dad again. I cannot wait to go there. So I'm really excited about that. But I know that I need to stay here for you and for Jack and Maddie. And I also know that your dad would want all of us to live the best earthly life that we can. He would demand it. And so I feel like I need to honor that the best way that I can. But I wish it wasn't this way. I wish he was still here. But we're all going to go. We're all going to be at that door, and then leaving our loved ones behind. And then what do we do with it that we're left behind? And what do we think that the people who have left do with their new lives? I don't think I would be doing as well as I am without any of these journeys to help me. I really feel like I've been given a gift at my age to have knowledge and to tap into this and to help me cope. Both experiences are going to help me cope and be the best I can be. And all I can say is when my mother died 20 years ago, I didn't have any tools. I had no tools for death. And I think we all need tools. And I think that these are really important tools in figuring out how to grieve, what to do with someone who was every part of your soul and being and that are now just completely vanished physically. So I really feel psilocybin has given me a lot in my life. And I'm thankful that somehow you stumbled over this world. I wouldn't have known it without you. And I do hope that people can find not only help in their life to not be wound so tight or to let go of pain that they're feeling that's keeping them from functioning, depression, or whatever they have. Somehow, if you can tap into psilocybin and know that there's a God there who knows exactly who you are, that was the other thing that was so profound for me. As a child, I would always say, how do you know everyone? How can you possibly know every human being on the planet? And now I know it is possible. He knows every single one of us and knows us intimately. So it's just really profound and very comforting for me that whenever I leave Earth, I know where I'm going. I know Marty will be there to greet me. And other people who've left will be there to greet me. And then I'll wait for you. I'll wait for you and Jack and Maddie and your loved ones and your children. And so I think, gosh, if we can just live on this planet Earth and be the happiest people we can be, and to let go of the small things, if you can find that somehow, you're just going to be in a better place overall. So I'm really, really grateful for psilocybin. And I'm really grateful that it's helping me to figure out what to do with this absence in my life and to create a new life. And it's been an amazing journey.
I'm going to try not to cry while I also want to talk about the impact that mushrooms had on Dad's life, because we haven't talked about that part yet. And one of the most important pieces of me being able to process his death in a way that feels, in a large way, really beautiful is because I know that he knew where he was going, because he had similar experiences to you. And, when we did this DIY family mushroom experience, which I'm so grateful that we were able to have. And, for anyone that's listening to this, psilocybin is a Schedule I drug, meaning that, we as a society find it to have no medicinal benefit, even though it's one of the most profound, we use the word innovation, even though these substances have been used for thousands of years in indigenous ceremonies all over the world. Every society since the beginning of time has altered their consciousness with plant medicines like psilocybin and ayahuasca, et cetera. There's so many. But I, in theory, illegally gave my parents drugs. And I'm so grateful that I did, because my understanding of Dad's complete abrupt removal from my life after speaking to him an hour before would be very different if I didn't have these tools to process them. And our ability to connect over this experience has largely been informed by things that have come to me through psychedelics. So I'm really grateful for that. And Dad also had really profound experiences. And I would like to share a story that you shared with me. Maybe I'll just tell the beginning of it and you can take it. But I listened to a voicemail on January 1st of this year. I went back after he passed and I listened to all of his voicemails that he left me. And he left me this voicemail when you and him had a mushroom journey together. It was a year to the date. So it's January 1st, New Year's Day of 2022, that you guys had this experience. And I listened to this voicemail a year after, like 2 weeks after he passed, because he passed on December 17th of this past year. And he said, "Alli, honey, we just had the best day. I just had such an amazing experience with psilocybin." He pronounced it wrong, I think, in the voicemail, because he could never pronounce it. And you were in the background, you guys were laughing, and it's such a beautiful memory. And you shared with me after that you had come into the room. And I would like if you could share maybe what he was doing in the room.
Well, my journey had ended. And so I walked into the room, and he has got the headphones on, and his arms are up like this. And he is just super happy. Just super, super happy.
In full celebration mode.
In full celebration mode. And so to be able to get there like that was really important to your dad. And I think that he also was experiencing God and experiencing happiness on a level that you can't touch on earth without this, without the help. And so it also gave me comfort knowing that your dad had maybe a different kind of near-death experiences with psilocybin, and was comforted to know that when he did pass away, where he would be going and that he would be taken care of and loved. And the other thing that I do want to mention was microdosing. He did try microdosing, and he was a workhorse. He was a workaholic. And so it was pretty incredible for me to see someone take a microdosing pill, and he only did it probably mostly on the weekends, but it really helped him to just relax. And that was really wonderful to see that it could give him that. And so I would say that for people who are wound so tight and can't find how to unloosen the strings, that this is a way to live life in a better way and just to be more level. And that did that for him.
And he called them his happy pills.
I did call them his happy pills. I said, maybe you should take one of your happy pills today.
And he would text me photos of the bottle and say, like, I love these. Can you send me more of my happy pills? And it was probably in the last year of his life. And I noticed a complete change in his spirit. I think also it was with the understanding that he was getting really close to retirement. And one of the, most intense lessons, I think, for all of us in this is that, he was days away from his retirement when he died.
Yeah.
A lot of what Dad and I's relationship was about this idea of destination happiness. And I would tell him this concept. I would talk to him about, we talked about death a lot. We would joke about it in like a playful way because how committed he was to getting to his retirement. And it was always, when I get there, then I can relax. When I get there, then, if this, then. And we had a lot of these conversations, like almost every time we spoke. And we talked almost every day because he would call us on the way home from work. He had a 7-minute drive, so we had a window where he would call each of his kids and he'd call you. And then as soon as that window was over, he was off for the day. And, we got to speak most days, and there's always banter back and forth about his retirement. And so what's tragic and comedic is that he didn't make it there. And in my experiences with psychedelics since he's passed, that lesson has felt very, very big for me, just in knowing that this concept of destination happiness doesn't exist. And he's just been such a teacher for that in me. And I also do want to say that on the flip side of this, especially towards the end of his life, one of the things that I shared in his eulogy that felt like the biggest lesson that his life represented for me was that he wanted what he had. He didn't even want more money. He was just so content with what he had. And I did, in part, I think, notice that shift because of psychedelics, in part because he was approaching retirement. It was all kind of worked together. He was also the healthiest, we thought, that he'd ever been. So I wanted to note those two things because both were true. Both this destination happiness mindset and the fact that he wanted exactly what he had. I wanted to double click one more time on something that you said, and it was the next thing I was going to ask you about. But one of the things that's really been ingrained in the aftermath of this experience for me, and kind of a concept that I keep coming back to, is that psychedelics open your visual cortex to the heaven that is all around you, which sounds like a very spiritual concept. But I think culturally we're taught that heaven is above us. And so like all of the books I remember reading when we were a kid, everything from the Bible to the cartoons to everything, it denotes heaven as this above us experience that is in the clouds. And my reframe of that, really, I haven't thought about it that much since before Dad died, but it's been something that I'm thinking about a lot, this idea that heaven is all around you, because really what psychedelics do, what psilocybin and other psychedelics do is they open your actual visual cortex so that you are letting more light in, your brain is firing in a new way, and so you're actually aware of more. You mentioned not needing to necessarily experience psilocybin again, but you can reference your experience and bring that back into your world when you're completely sober.
Yeah. Yeah, I just feel like you're more aware that maybe heaven is still above, but it brings it all in and around you and closer to you. And if you're lucky enough to experience that with this journey, you'll just never forget it, because you do feel that there's much more. You're given much more answers than you never even knew were possible. And if you're looking for these things, you can ask the questions and find them. And I think you have to want to know what are the answers, and maybe they just come to you. The other thing I don't want to forget to mention about psilocybin that I feel is really important is not only the mental aspect, but the physical aspect. I feel that maybe there's much that we don't know that it can do for the body itself. And I hope that as time goes by, we can learn more about what it can do to physically heal us. Because I feel like if I could feel my brain neurons going off. I also spent some time in that first part of my journey working on a back problem that I have. And that was really interesting to feel that and know that I could maybe work on a spine. So I just feel like there's so much to this that we're just learning about, that it's very intriguing. I'm going to be excited to follow these medicines and see what else they're doing for people, what else is possible.
And it is interesting because it's the first time, in the last 4, 5, 6 decades that we're really studying them actively. But again, they've been used for thousands of years. They're actually the only medicine that has stood the test of time. And so a lot of the physical ailments that people have dealt with for thousands of years have been treated through psychedelics, both microdosing, macrodosing, all sorts of plant medicines. And so I'm really excited about all the clinical research that's happening, because I actually think that clinical angle is what opened your mind to being able to think this is something that I would want to experience. And the fact that we're studying it, MDMA has now been approved by the FDA. We're in phase 3 clinical trials, which is amazing. It's been granted breakthrough therapy status. MDMA will be the first psychedelic that's legalized on a widespread basis, followed by psilocybin. Ketamine right now is the only legal psychedelic. It's really a dissociative, but it's in the psychedelic category. It's legal all across the country. It's having profound impact on so many people, and there's risks, again, to all of these that we're talking about, especially ketamine. But is there anything that you would say specifically to people that are living in Georgia or our family in Missouri that maybe they'll listen to this episode if we decide to release it? But, anything that you would say to anyone that's a little open-minded, maybe after hearing this conversation, places you would recommend they start researching? You kind of mentioned the book, but just anything you'd like to share with people that are...
I think if anybody knows anyone who's especially dealing with mental problems, any kind of mental problems, I think if they would pick up the Michael Pollan book and read it, that would help them to make a decision whether or not they wanted to help themselves or help another family member. I mean, who doesn't want your loved ones or your friend to not be in a place where they're not living their best lives and you know that they could get some help? So if everyone could get access to this that needs access to this, and whether your problems are super small, but they're impacting your life, or they're so huge that you can't live or function, to be able to go on a 4-hour journey once or twice in your life and really have someone help you and guide you into what are you looking for? What are you trying to solve? To look inside and find the answers to that. I just think that that's the most precious gift a human being can have happen to them, or maybe have happened to someone else that they know.
I don't want to forget to talk about other ways that you have had, other ways that you have stayed connected to Dad and things that we've done. We've experimented with a few different things, breath work, meditation, journaling, and a friend of mine who've actually had on the podcast before, Mary Pardee, Dr. Mary Pardee. Her episode's amazing because she actually dives into, trauma and how it's stored in the body. So a lot of the things that we are, talking about very high level, she very much goes into the research of and describes really well. So if anyone's interested, that's a really good episode that we've recorded previously.
I just can't thank your friend enough for gifting us the gift, because it was incredible just to breathe and feel that I could feel Marty and know that he is close by and near. I mean, what a gift to just feel that they are near. It was a profound experience for me. I'll never forget it. So I've had lots of help in dealing with death. And then also reading books about grieving is really helpful for anyone who's grieving. And journaling. I never did these with my mother. I got shingles when she died. I did not know how to process death. And so I think that Marty would be really proud of me to say, Linda, you're doing the right things. You're going to be okay, because that's all they ever want to know. So, I mean, I'll have days where it's not good, but I think I'll have more days where I know that I'm going to be okay. And I think with all of these things, the psilocybin, the breath work, the journaling, we all need these tools. We have to have these tools to know how to grieve, or it's not going to go as well as your loved one would just hope that you would survive without them could be. It just won't go as well. It'll be harder.
And so music, journaling, breathwork, psilocybin, all these tools have just been such an important part of our grief process, and I'm really grateful to have access to them. So,
well, and Alli, I do want to say that your point to your dad about living today versus what's out there tomorrow, the fact that you kept having this conversation with him, and I think he finally understood it. And I think if your dad could come back to Earth and tell anybody one thing, it would be that there is no destination happiness. And I think psilocybin helps you to see that you have to live today. If you can't be happy today, you're not necessarily going to be happy tomorrow. So you gave him that. He had peace in that. And I think that probably is the biggest lesson that I think that he learned about it, and that I also learned about it. It's today. It's how you feel today and what you make of your life today. It's been a big lesson for us. And thank you for giving us that. Really, thank you. I wouldn't be doing as well without the help that I got. So I'm glad that your world has crossed over into this world. I'm really happy for you. And I think you're a much happier human being. I think you've touched a lot of people. I think people who have had experience with this can also touch other people. And we're just kinder people, aren't we? Because we're not wound so tight anymore. Things are just better. So I just want you to know, I think your dad would tell you that you gave that to him. And he achieved that. It's a little late in his life, but I think he would want you to know that he understood that.
Okay. I have a few more questions.
Okay.
Thank you for saying that. I love you.
I love you too.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share that you feel like you didn't get to say?
I guess I would just say if anyone has an interest in doing this, they should do their research. They should do it with an understanding of what this could mean. Reading the Michael Pollan book really helped me to understand. And your dad was always like, Linda, well, if you've read it, I believe what you've read, so I'll try it too.
With everything, not just with that.
With everything. But
and
yeah,
vice versa.
to get educated, educate yourself. If you want to know more, there's lots of information out there. And more is coming and happening. And the fact that there are clinical trials says a lot. People are starting to pay attention. It is helping people. It can help lots of people. Mm-hmm. And I just think if it's done in the right way, it can be the most life-changing experience you'll ever have. It has been for me.
So I want to say one more thing, and then I have one final question. I just want to say thank you, because we decided to record this yesterday, and whether or not we decide to put it out into the world, it's something that will be recorded for Maddie and Jack and I, and maybe some family members that I think this conversation could be really powerful for. So I just wanted to say thank you for your eloquence and speaking about this, for being open-minded to explore this world with me and to explore your own mind, because it's one thing for someone in my generation with the information and tools and everything that I have been given access to because of the way that you and Dad raised me, because the freedom that I had within my own mind was in large part because you guys took care of me. You paid for our college. I didn't come out of college with debt. I was given such a launching pad into the world to be able to explore my own consciousness. And so a lot of the conclusions that I've been able to come to in my life are because of how you and Dad groomed my mind and Maddie and Jack's mind growing up. So I'm really grateful for that. And I just am so thankful that you're sharing about this in the way that you are. Because I think if we do decide to share it with other people that might be in a similar boat, whether it be with grief or with depression or with anything, or with just an understanding of the world, it will be really helpful. It'll be really, really helpful. So thank you.
Thanks for asking me, Alli.
And the last thing that I want to ask you, we ask everyone this is the last question on the show, because this is a podcast about psychedelics. And I don't know if you've listened to any other episodes before, but
I have. I've listened.
Okay.
I've listened to several of your episodes.
Okay, good. What is the most important lesson that psychedelics, Psilocybin, has taught you?
The most important lesson that I have learned from Psilocybin is that I can be a better person than I thought that I knew. So I only knew me, and I knew who I was, but I did want to find out, could I be better? Could I be a better person? Could I live differently than what I was before? And that's what it has given me, is a different view on the rest of my life. It's an easier pace. It's an easier life. I have some understanding that I didn't have before, and some security in knowing what's going to happen to me at the end of my life. That's probably the biggest gift that I've been given. So many things.
I think Dad would love this conversation. I know that he will. He's going to be really excited to listen to it again. So thank you. I love you so much.
I love you too, Alli. Thanks for having me on your show.
Okay. Thanks for diving into the multiverse with us. If you're interested in being a future guest on the show, sponsorship, partnership, or you're just mushroom curious, we're always looking to expand our mycelium network. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Into the Multiverse, where you can find clips from this podcast, psychedelic legalization news, events that we're doing, and so much more. In addition, we've also created the world's first ever mushroom-specific marketplace called The Multiverse, which you can find on Instagram at Multiverse or online at yourmultiverse.com. We've also created our own in-house consumer lifestyle brand called Supermush. We make mushroom mouth sprays. We make a whole line of mushroom streetwear. You can find it on Instagram at Supermush or online at supermush.com. We'll see you next week. Much love.